the garden will not have a chair, and we have only 2 volunteer workers. Now, yes,
What does that person do?
well, Lois, you're sitting right next to the chair.
Well, I don't really have a written job description, but mostly I've just been coordinating work days. We meet every Monday from 9 to 11 on Mondays. We do whatever dictated by the condition of the garden. So it could be anything from weeding, pruning, planting, transplanting, potting, brush hogging. I've done that too. But things don't work well during the summer months and there's nobody here to take care of the garden. It really is overgrown quickly. So when we come back in the fall, that's when we do most work. Our target is always to have it stripped up and started on dedicated when it's Saturday. So I pretty much just I'm running the garden, keep in touch with the manager, of course, and let me know what we're doing. Do a coordinate with Daryl when we're contemplating doing a special project. We fixed up our borders a little bit this season. We haven't done much planting since the day time. First it was too cold, and we were wearing jackets, etc. during January, February. And now it's too hot to dig and transplant much because everything's under the heat. So it's signing. But it's hard for competition now. We did some top dressing with a little bit of wood dirt to stick it up. I think pretty much that's it. I've been doing it since 2009. Gail took over for me for a couple of years just before COVID hit, and then had to take that throne and I took over again. So anybody who's interested in it, it's not necessarily something that one person should be doing, because we have a mixture of snowbirds and permanent residents here. If anybody's interested in helping out with maintaining the garden, whether you're here for just a few months or you're here year-round, people can share that responsibility and work off of each other. So there's plenty of wiggle room there for people to help out in the garden. Our workers don't necessarily have to be members. We have several volunteers, or either check volunteers, or some who can volunteer over at Mangrove Park. We've got to know each other and form a little group that go over and help out. So kind of fair game for anybody to help the garden and enjoy gardening and like that sort of thing. It's an educational experience for those who are not savvy about native plants. You learn a lot. You learn plant names and how they grow and what their growing conditions can be, etc. So it's a nice experience over there. So I'm hoping somebody will step up and help out.
Thanks, Lois. I want to emphasize what she said about this doesn't have to be one person who's the garden chair. We can have co-chairs. If you want to share among 3, if you want to have, 4 people, a committee, that's fine. But we really need somebody to take responsibility for the gardens, because if we don't keep the garden up, the land is actually owned by the county, and if it's not kept up, it will revert to county maintenance. I have put on each row a 4-piece or a 4-page color backstory of the garden that has photographs that go clear back to 2008, when the garden was just scrubbed, and how they cleared the area, and the early plantings, and they got an award, got a picture in the paper. So I think there's only one copy on each chair, so just pass it, on each row. So pass it up and down the row, take a look at it as you have the opportunity. Now, during the meeting, after the meeting, whatever it takes. And give some serious thought to helping out the garden, because it would be tragic after 15 years if that were to fall into disrepair and go back to county maintenance. Yes?
I mean, I help out in the garden on Monday, but I get conflict the first Monday of the month, and then I'm not here, let's say 5 months out of the year. But I would certainly help out with somebody. I just don't feel that I should take over since I'm not here.
You don't want the whole
A quarter of
responsibility.
the time.
This is an opportunity for a co-chair here.
Yeah, you know, I would help the person.
Laura is experienced, she's familiar with the garden, and she will be happy to help if somebody else, will just help her so she doesn't have to do it all alone. That's great. At the bottom of the agenda is my email, and if you want to help, email me or talk to me at the meeting or whatever it takes, but please help us there. Next. The bottom of the agenda also has a few other places that you might like to volunteer if you're just absolutely not a gardener. There are still places that you can help out the chapter, and you can still email me to volunteer. Just a second. Mary Ann, follow me up here. Mary Ann, who is the smiling face by our sign-in book and who hands out all the raffle tickets and all that, come here. Joined our chapter in 2003, which was almost 20 years ago. Mary Ann also is moving back to New England at the end of this season, permanently. That means we don't have a hospitality chair, but more important, we don't have Mary Ann. She has served as secretary as well as hospitality chair, where we're going to miss her punch and brownies, by the way. And before she joined the chapter, she and her late husband, Phil, actually helped establish Cedar Point as a local park. Before they joined the chapter, before this building was built, they were out here leading guided walks just to help people learn the value of the plants here and the native plants. They were instrumental in establishing Cedar Point. She also has helped me personally. She has done a lot of help with the publications and brochures that we've had, and has in fact gone through and assisted with over 500 copies of the publications and saved me a lot of hours doing that. And because of this, I would like to give you a certificate of thanks from Mangrove Chapter and actually from Cedar Point. Great, now I get to introduce Bruce Ward, who is our program chair.
Can I do a commercial? If anybody here was at our propagation workshops, we unveiled the air layering of the red maple. It is loaded with fruits. And so, look at that. Wow. So what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna put this in a long, narrow pot with some soil and make sure it carries on as a tree. And not sure what we'll do with it at this point, but
Maple syrup, what else?
I think it's sugar maple. This is a red maple, and it's the one that's growing right out in the garden, the center of the garden out here. So we had some success. If you and some friends or other people here in the club, in the chapter, want to have a propagation workshop, just send me an email or call me with some date choices, and we can set another one up. We had a lot of fun and a lot of success. So All right, so today, next month, we've got, on April 12th at the meeting, Dr. Catherine Clements is going to talk about biodiversity and potential impacts on human health, including how time spent in nature provides direct benefits for our mental and physical health. So put it on your calendar, that should be really interesting. Today, we have one of our own, Kate Borduas. I left her extensive introduction at home, so I'm going to wing this. Kate is a master naturalist. She does many walks in Sarasota County, Charlotte County, probably other places too. And she speaks extensively in the area about many different subjects related to the native environment here in Florida. We're lucky to have her here in our chapter. She's been extremely generous with her time, and she's been a dedicated volunteer. Please help me welcome Kate Borduas.
Well, that was very kind. Now, I do have a little gadget that I can plug in, but I have a really good playground voice. So if I will just talk, I'd like to talk without a mask because I know one or two of you are of an age where reading my lips is helpful. So that's what we'll do. I'm going to introduce my guest today, Brooke Elias, who is the inspiration for this program. Brooke is an entomologist, and we met at Shamrock Park, and she really inspired me to learn a lot more about insects and to appreciate how amazing they are. This was a sponsored talk. I was asked by Dennis Area Orwell, but I'm pleased to do a program about the insect apocalypse because at the end we'll show the populations are plummeting across the globe. I said, sure. Well, what I found is you really couldn't talk about the insect apocalypse until why it mattered and why we should care a lot until you talked about and understood insects at all. And so this hence part one. Part two is kind of sort of floating in the air between Brooke and my Ethernet. But we hope maybe next winter we'll have that program to share as well. This is the world premiere. We did have a dress rehearsal. We had a dress rehearsal. And one of our Contra members pointed out that I really blew one whole section, and I really go home and redo it. So that has been done. After, when we finished and we're mingling, there's some insect-related objets in this beautiful mural here, giving us an idea of how, in this program, I try to express the sheer volume in terms of number of species. Biomass. It's just, we are dwarfed. Mammals are dwarfed. Humans are truly Tinkerbellized by the mass of insects. So they are the little insects, the creatures that rule the world. So this is where I started, and I realized I couldn't do it. I couldn't really discuss the causes of and implications of the degradation without first bringing in chapter 1. So why do we care? I bet the people in this room know that, right? Why do we care?
Pollinating.
Pollinating is one, because they rule the world. They run the world. Without insects in the world, life as we know it would collapse. It would take about 2 months. That was E.O. Wilson's calculation. Should we depart this world, things would revert to equilibrium. So just right there, who is most important? They really matter, because if they were wiped out, we would lose life as we know it in just a few months. So why are they so important? And I've kind of broken this into chapters because it helps those of us with a the attention span deficits to keep on track. So while there are miracles of evolution, there are a lot of them. They are key players in the food web and trophic transfer. Without them, we couldn't really get all of the energy that's sequestered in this vegetation into the food web. They are the nexus. They perform amazing services, many of which are utilized by us. And they have perfected the art of getting along well, although they do have their occasional invasion of other nest sites. So that's the backbone of the program, and we're going to examine each of those questions separately. But first we're going to do Insects 101. What is an insect? This, you can probably tell, is not an insect. But what is an insect? First of all, they're arthropods. Arthropods means jointed feet, and there are an awful lot of arthropods, including, and we're going to focus here, but who knew that a barnacle was an arthropod? Excuse me, but yes it is. So we're going to focus on this subphylum of Hexapoda, 6 feet. We're not going to make a distinction between winged insects and unwinged insects, although it is a distinction. It's not really germane to our story today. Insecta, from the term insecare in Latin, to cut into, we think of an insect as having, this little gadget doesn't work on the television. The 3 main body parts, we think of the head, thorax, and abdomen, second grade, we do that. But those 3 major body parts are actually fused body parts of multiples of body parts that are fused together and become specialized by section. So you have the head. This is all about senses. Not all senses, but many senses, particularly vision, hormone perception. Mouth parts are incredibly variable. There are many adult insects aboard without mouth parts. They don't need mouth parts because they're not going to live long enough to eat. They're going to live long enough to find a partner, do what they do, and die. Females will stick around long enough to lay eggs. So the thorax is about locomotion, and so that's the 6 legs are attached, and the wings, if they have them, and you can have none, or 2, or 4. And then the abdomen is about digestion and reproduction. And you can see clearly in this illustration how many different sections there are. So for respiration, they don't have airways and lungs like we do. They're pointed as spiracles. They're pointed to their little gaps, little portholes on the abdomen and the thorax, and that's where the gas exchange takes place. So that's Insects 101. Any questions, or shall I go forward? They are miracles of evolution. I found this quotation. You can read it along with me. It's one of the most important signs in animal history, transforming these small, obscure arthropods into a dominant terrestrial group. And anyway, we know without which life would collapse. So they're pretty darn important. And they're important for the services they produce, but this miracle of how evolution, how they selected for metamorphosis. Now there are 3 kinds of basic insects. There are ones who have no metamorphosis, like this silverfish over here. We'll look at that a little closer. This blubber, the Georgia thumper, this grasshopper, goes through incomplete metamorphosis, and then the butterfly. When we think of metamorphosis, I bet you everyone here thinks that monarch butterflies in the top 3, right? And they should be. That's a male, by the way. See those little dots on the hind leg? That's how you can tell it's a male. So arthropods, jointed legs. They first appeared before terrestrial life. They were in the ocean 500 million years ago. The best record we have of this is from the Burgess Shale up into the high Midwest and near the Rockies. Am I getting my geography right on that? more or less. Hallucigenia is my particular favorite over here. The Burgess Shale, we got these fossils because of the silt slide, because otherwise their soft bodies are hard to fossilize. So 100 million years to take their time, but they decided to go to on dry land. And at that point, they started to evolve into insects. They generally arthropods. They became the insects that we know today, and they did it pretty quickly. So we have the silverfish and the springtail. They're ametabolous. There's an egg, it hatches, you get a teeny weeny little nymph, and then there's a little bigger nymph, and a bigger nymph, and a bigger nymph. And it basically doesn't change. It's sort of a little bit like us. You start as a little one, and then you get to be a bigger one. So that's ametabolous, or non-metabolous. Hemi, semi, demi, little metabolous. So this metamorphosis. So this is where you have their two basic kinds. The grasshopper on the right-hand side, you start off, it's called an instar, and you kind of look a little like the adult form, but you're missing some pieces. And then as they get big and they shed their skeleton, new pieces start to emerge. And in this case, you can see the wings. And then when it goes from the sixth instar, the sixth stage, it then emerges fully fledged with its wings. And they're all doing that on land. The second way it happens is where the larva, and the adult operate in different spheres. So the larval dragonfly, when it's ready to molt, it just comes out fully formed as an adult. But they're doing their life cycle phases take place in different areas. Well then, after a little bit, complete metamorphosis, and this is what we think of when we think of metamorphosis, this ladybug, egg, the larva, the pupa, and we're going to talk about the pupa in a minute, where everything shuts down, something really mysterious happens, and peek into that mystery. And then after a certain period, it emerges as an adult. It looks nothing like the, so on this side we had really pretty much resembling the adult until it emerged fully armored. And this, there's no resemblance whatsoever. You can see the nymph phase, it's the pupal phase, chrysalis phase that's missing. Now this is really super successful lifestyle. So successful that 85% of insects undergo complete metamorphosis. And the reason for this is because the adult and the larva are not competing. So if you've got larvae that are eating vegetation and you've got adults that are looking for pollen and nectar or rotting meat, maybe, it depends. It depends what you are. So this is a highly successful life cycle, lifestyle, and so successful that once it was achieved, really hasn't changed much. You can see these current species resembling fossilized species. So once they hit their mark, insects kind of stuck with it. Pelicans, the same thing. Bucky Fuller. Who's old enough to remember Bucky Fuller? Everybody, yeah. Geodesic domes, right? This is his quote. There's nothing in a caterpillar that tells you it's going to be a butterfly. Bucky should have read the natural sciences a little closer. Jan Swammerdam was actually a physician, hated practicing medicine, and he was an amateur zoologist. He'd only had to meet a few patients to get enough money to go back to his insects. And he also worked with microscopes. And he did two huge things. The first is he challenged and successfully the notion of spontaneous generation. Insects were such low life forms, it was believed that the God of creation, this, omnipotent, omniscient, Lord of on high, would not have bothered with insects. They were just beneath then they would have said its notice. Well, he, with his experiments, proved that insects were not creatures of spontaneous generation. He also challenged the prevailing notion that it's kind of hard to describe. It believed in metamorphosis, but that you would go from being one caterpillar to another caterpillar. Or the connection was not made, but what he showed was that these life stages that we talked about, the egg, the pupa, the egg, the larva, the pupa, and the adult, were phases, stages in the same life. Am I right? Is it imago? Is that how it's pronounced, Brooke? Yeah. So what he demonstrated with his microscope are imaginal discs. Now these little core pieces live inside the larva. Here, I wish I had a pointer. So they're there. All of the adult body parts exist sort of in utero. It's all driven, we won't get too deeply into it, it's driven by hormones. Hormones are telling the larva to eat and fat. And then some of the switch changes, and the hormones say, screw the fat, put all the energy into these imaginal discs. And those imaginal discs, this is happening inside the chrysalis, those imaginal discs have been shut down for the life of the larva and now expanding and growing and forming all of the body parts that we recognize as an adult. And that includes wings. So we're going to talk about wings for just a little bit. Insects were the first to evolve wings. Flying squirrels do not fly. Flight evolved 4 times. The insects evolved flight first. It didn't happen overnight. And insects grew large. During this period, there was much more oxygen in the atmosphere, and they grew large. They didn't have any predators either, so they could, other than a jump, so they could grow pretty large. This is a 28-inch wingspan. That's yeah. And why select for flight? Well, because you can get around a lot farther. You can find better mates, larger breeding pools, and this group knows species co-evolved together, and insects and angiosperms co-evolved, and particularly for pollination, all of these, and others, even sloths are pollinators. So, but insects, these are the insects that pollinate. And they have global dominance. Now, flight is this flight. These wings, unlike all the other flighted animals, insect wings were not adapted hands. So when you start up, you got a little wing nub, and you jump off a plant, and that little wing nub gives you a little drag so you don't land so heavily. And then they breed, and you're going to select for bigger wing nubs, and you're finding you flap your wing nubs, and you can get a little higher. So over time, those wing nubs evolved into actual wings, but they were never hands. And so that was how flight was achieved. Pterosaurs, these were, I would have loved to have seen these. Anyway, these were hands. These were hands very much like bats, birds. Avian dinosaurs were around for a long time before they achieved flight. We'll talk about that in the pelican story. But they achieved flight about 150 million years ago when they got keratin B in their feathers. Became sturdy enough to stand downbeat. And of course, bats. Flying mammals, again, these are adapted hands. One interesting thing happened with the emergence of avian dinosaurs and birds. Insects then came to select for smaller and smaller, because the bigger they were, the lumpier they were, the easier they were to catch. So if you're a little bug, you can get out of the way of a bird a little bit easier. 'cause easier. So that was the selective pressure there. And of course, bats. Flying mammals, again, these are adapted hands. One interesting thing happened with the emergence of avian dinosaurs and birds. Insects then became to select for smaller and smaller, because the bigger they were, the lumpier they were, the easier they were to catch. So if you're a little bug, you can get out of the way of a bird a little bit easier. So that was the selective pressure there. Any question about their miracles of adaptation, or just a round of applause for insects, miracles of adaptation? And there's a lot of them. You can't ignore them. You know, you've ever been, especially so close to twilight, and the air will just be full of these little bugs that maybe are a millimeter in size. Who knows what they are? Somebody knows what they are, but the truth is it's believed there are a lot of insects that are still considered to be identified. However you do it, whether you do a pie chart like this, insects outnumber everything else by species and by biomass, they outweigh us. Every chart you find, it's like half to 3/4 is insects. So we don't really need to get too much into statistics because first it's boring. But where you get down into arthropods, they tend to be dominated by insects, wasps, beetles, flies, and then Lepidoptera, moths and mudflies. But this is easier to talk about because it's not statistics. It is how incredibly variable they are and how beautiful they are. Now, that was just a little love bug. That wasn't beautiful, but they do come in wondrous forms, colors, disguises, just spectacular. There's our little Georgia Thumper. But when we talk about size range, Tinkerbell Nana is, what is she? She's 1/10 of a millimeter. How small is that? Can you even imagine that? And she's got all these body parts, and she's got spiracles, and she has reproductive organs. Where is she? But she's tiny, tiny. And then we have the stick insect here up in China. Stick insects can be the willies, to tell you the truth. I had them all in. It's like, whoa! So that's 24-inch long stick insect, and then that's a beetle from Africa, and I've of course forgotten the name of what it is, but it's a big fat beetle. And what about lifespans? A termite queen can live as many as 50 years. Whoa! And you know what she's doing that whole time? An adult mayfly, by comparison, will live only long enough till it mates. It might be a few hours, it might be a day. I think that's it. So, although this one did appear to have mouth parts, just in case it was for a couple of days. So that's the sheer mass and variability. Any questions before we go on to? And as native plant people, this is where we live, right? This is where we live. This is why we say, or at least the beginning of my walk, why do we care? It's not because we love lizards, although we do. It's not just that we love being outside, although we do. It's because we appreciate that native plants are the foundation of a successful ecosystem. And this is where producers, that's all vegetation, and then the primary consumers that concentrate that energy are insects. You know how photosynthesis works, storing carbon, releasing oxygen. This is all very good. So you've got all the energy stored in the leaves. And here we go. How's that in there again? And so the leaves, we've got all these energies stored in those leaves. And larvae, the larval form of insects can eat fresh leaves. It's not the only thing they can do, which is why the emphasis on fresh. If you're a little leaf, do you want to be eaten? No. So you have defenses. You have defenses against that. And so you can send out volatile organic compounds, you can call in the life brigade, you can call in parasites, parasitoid insects to kill off insects that's eating you. Well, this is going to work except for when it doesn't work, when insects find a way around those defenses. And this is where specialization of host plants comes in. They're host plants because the larval insects have found a way around that particular set of defenses, be it parasitic wasps or the volatile organic compounds. And the monarch butterfly even goes so far as to sequester those toxins for their own defense. So when we plant our gardens, we plant a variety. Nature doesn't like monoculture anyway. We plant a variety because that way we will be supporting a variety of larval insects. And then that's the other thing, that plants, if they can't have a sufficient organic compounds, they will bring in parasitoid insects to, like the ladybugs, parasitoid insect that comes in and it eats aphids and thrips. So, the little ladybug, she's a killer. She's a killer. They eat, I one time knew, but it's a lot of aphids in the day. Uh-oh, here we go. So when we're doing our planting, when we're working to consciously support insects and pollinators, we think, well, let's plant some flowers that they're going to come to. Well, that's only part of it. What we really need to do is plant things in our garden that will be eaten. And I know a lot of you here are familiar with Doug Callaby. His latest book is The Oak, or The Way of the Oak. And he and others have identified keystone plants that are host to vast numbers of insects, or to put it another way, their defenses aren't too strong, nor do they need to be, because they got 1 million or so leaves. So if they lose 100,000, who cares? So it's not a precious little plant. Or if you're planting, it's Solidago. What's the name? Thank you, goldenrod. So you really want to do a balance of things in your garden. If you're going to plant one tree, make it an oak, and it doesn't matter where in the world you are. So here we have our little, so when we think of, also another way we think of insects, we think of the very charismatic, those butterflies, the ones, the lunar moths, really what we want to care about are the enormous little moths. They all look the same. Has anybody read Peterson's Guide to Moths of Eastern North America? They all look the same. They're like 7 dots, 5 dots, 6 dots. They're producing a zillion little caterpillars. And this is what we want. When we want to support wildlife, these are the critters we want. Because these are the critters birds need to fledge their chicks. It is a black-capped chickadee. It's not a Carolina chickadee. Well, anyway, let's just pretend it's a black-capped chickadee. Calamy had his nest cam and showed that a pair of black-capped chickadees brought 9,000 caterpillars to their nestlings over a 2-week period when they're fledged. And that was in addition to feeding themselves. And the chickadees don't fly far. So they want a massive concentration. And you're not going to find that in row crops. You're going to find that in oak trees. So putting in those trees is what you really want. This is what the birds need. So that is how the larvae eat and why they eat and how they help feed wildlife. But there's another way they do it. They not only eat the fresh leaves, they eat dead wood. This, though, they need a heavy lift. They need a big assist on this. Oh, if I hit that button one more time. So, a fungus is like us. Marian is not like me. They're consumers. They can't produce. They're consumers. They have to get their food, not on a plate, but they have to get their food. And they want carbon. And they do it. The fungal hyphae penetrate material and then through an amazing process break down and absorb carbon. This is good. So beetles, we've all seen beetle-ridden wood trees, dead live trees now these days, but mostly dead trees. Well, I gotta tell you, they've got big mandibles. They're not gonna break down the cellulose and the lignin. They just don't have the enzymes to do it. So what happens is that when the beetle lays her egg, it's covered in a layer of hyphal fungi. So when that egg is sitting there waiting to hatch, the hyphal fungi are the advanced team, and they're going out and they're digesting the wood and they're breaking down the cellulose, they're breaking down the lignin. So by the time that little maggot is hatched, it's got a buffet. It's all waiting for it. And this is important, first of all, because we need to recycle everything back, or else we'd be in a bit of a mess. But because this is another way of supporting wildlife, because particularly the nests, the excavation nests, cavity nesters, need that wood to be broken down just a bit. Not to the point where it's robbed, but just a bit. And so this is another way that insects with their fungal partner are helping create habitat. And of course, beetle larvae are just yummy for if you're a woodpecker. That's what they're tapping away to get. So larvae will also eat flesh, which is kind of disgusting, but it's actually a resurgence because they've got these really specialized little mandibles that contain all sorts of chemicals on them that help drug-resistant infections, destroy dead tissue, and they have enzymes in their saliva that promotes new skin growth. So with all these drug-resistant infections now, maggots are making their way back. I'm going to start with antibiotics and go on from there. So, nexus or insects in this nexus in the trophic transfer, we've got that, should we go on? So why are they important? Well, they invented whole industries. We tend to think of us as being the manufacturing gods of the world. No. Insects got there. Who doesn't love good dung beetle? They're fun. And they come in rollers, tumblers. There are some of them who live in the poop.
That's like fun.
And of course, they did all of this. They are specialized in terms of herbivores, omnivores. So if you're England and you're kind of like in the early 1800s and you go to these ne'er-do-wells, you're nothing to do with them. Where do you send them? You send them to Australia, right? And in Australia, they say, this is great. This is farmland. We're going to have sheep and cows, and this is going to be fabulous. Well, of the 250 native species of dung beetle, there was not one that could manage the dung of cows and sheep. So Australia was deep in poop, which is, if anybody been to Australia, you know how many flies there are. That dates from the European era. And so it took a long time, because at some point they realized you can't just bring in new species willy-nilly. I'm not sure they ever really figured that out. But they did bring in, they finally did introduce, and they were from Africa. They introduced some dung beetles from Africa, which I'm sure it wasn't funny at the time, but originated manufacturing. So I'm not quite sure the chemical way this happened, but using insects, saliva, like substance that we might think of as saliva, can be used. They chew it up and they're making, they're creating, first of all, the manufacturing housing and the manufacturing paper. They invented agriculture. They farm fungus, which they chew and eat and feed. They feed the leaf cutter ants, bring the leaf in, chew it up, and you let the fungus feed it, and then they take part of the fungus and feed it to their young. Animal husbandry. So they're happy, where they herd the aphids to get the honeydew. And a lot of times when you see black mold on plants, that's where things have kind of gotten a little out of hand. And how do we use insects? How do we as humans, because ultimately we think it's all about us. It's all about us. It's about us. How do we put these products and processes to use? And I would like to suggest in ways that you have not imagined. Or maybe you have. I haven't. Ink, oak, gall wasps. Who's in the wall with me? We kept finding oak galls recently. Oak galls, and these oak gall wasps are tiny, and what thickens, they get parasitized by other wasps. They create these galls which are broken down. And it was the first time, around the time of these documents, that ink became permanent with a little iron and Arabic. But the reason these haven't faded or washed away is we have permanent ink. We all know silk. There are now no silkworms free in the wild. All silkworms that exist are farmed. And so they farm just enough. So with the cocoons, when they pupate, that is the cocoon. And then once they finish making the cocoon, before they start the transformation of the discs, they boil them, kill off the larva. If they didn't, the larva would eat its way out and destroy the silk. And the silk is useful because it's a mild, unbroken thread. So there's no silkworms, silk moths in the wild. Whoops. Red. This is a little slime bug. Red takes about 70 pounds of these cochineal bugs to create Skittles. Skittles. Yeah, they're not beetles, they are scale bugs, but they are used for all of these dye projects. They are red, and indeed Laura is correct. Oopsie. Oh, must be coming in the next one. So it doesn't. Yeah, I think we've combined it with another one. So all of the things we put in our mouth and on our body and used for natural dyes. I wanted to try to make natural dye from, of all things, lichen, which you can imagine, anybody who knows me is not super. It didn't work at all. It didn't, I came out pale. It was like, oh, there was not, I said, I'll leave it to the experts. So shellac, the lac bug, L-A-C, the lac bug, when she's laying her egg, she extrudes this hard finish to protect herself, and then that comes in all different colors, and then that is collected and used for all sorts of different purposes, the jelly beans, the wax pills, all of these things that you can see, and also for furniture and fine instruments. But when we think of, really when we think about it, we think, oh, what do? They pollinate our plants, because that's what we think about. If you're not in the business of going out there and collecting lac in Vietnam, where they have whole plantations devoted to it. So we think about the pollination of plants. Now this benefits the bugs, it benefits the plants, and in a lot of ways it benefits us. When we think about it, we tend to think about European honeybees. It's just how our minds work. That's what we see. I mean, probably not in this group. I mean, this group we think about leaf cutting bugs. I know you do. You never think of honeybees. But the honeybee is the bee, the dominant bee, the European honeybee, which is of course European. And this is a bee through honey, not just honey, but all of the different products that are harvested. The propolis, I can't remember what it's used for. Do you remember what propolis is used for?
Well, it's a popular supplement.
It is.
Topically and to ingest.
To ingest. I'm fortunate, we have someone here who is less fortunate. I can be stung by a bee, and I'll maybe just get like a little soft spot there for like 5 minutes, and other people have to carry a pen. No, it's not carries instead. No. So bees, honeybees do a great deal for us. They're colonial bees, and we're going to talk about that in a minute. And they produce honey, which I just love my honey. And they live in colonies. Where we were walking Mangrove State Forest, oddly enough, there were a whole bunch of hives in there. So we do know they can travel some distances. But the vast majority of bees are not colonial. They are solitary. Being a solitary, and this just down here, some statistics lists. I didn't know until recently that 29 species in Florida are endemic of bees. I would have to look into that a little better. But the vast majority are solitary bees. And if you're the female solitary bee, I've likened this to being a single mother with a minimum wage job and no transportation. It is hard. You got your eggs and you got your little pods, and you lay your thing and you do this, and then you go to work again, and you got to get more pollen, and then you come back and then more pollen, more eggs, and you're out again, and it's an endless grind. And the men are where?
Fishing.
There you go. So it's really a grind to be a single female. This orchid bee, I would just point out to you, is a fairly new arrival in Florida from Mexico. That's a female. The males have these giant tibia where it's a story for another day, but just keep an eye out for them because they're really things of great beauty, and they're just in the last couple of years shown up.
Where are they from?
Mexico. And they don't appear to be out competing any natives. So there's not that I would find anyway. It's just, well, they're here. They have this very kind of career lifestyle. They're leaf-cutted bees. Since you asked the question, so the males chew leaves, fragrant leaves if they can get them, and pad them into these giant saddlebags on their tibia. And then the males will get together, and the female will be attracted, and they use that as a lure to bring her in. And she mates with as many as she can. This is where we withhold judgment. We are not bees, and it's her best interest to have as many genetic donors as possible for her brood. So these are the colonial bees. Now there are some bees that are partially colonial, but we're going to count them as solitary. The mining bees will have a single opening in the soil, and then they'll have their own channels. So they're not really, they don't do anything that counts as what the term we'll use is eusocial. So these are our only colonial bees. Eusociality. This is where you have groups of organisms that work together for the common good. And Darwin, his term was confounded by this, because this whole theory of evolution by natural selection did not support this. And he made peace with it by considering them to be a single organism, a superorganism, if you will. That's the only way that he could fit them into his theory of natural selection. And here, I just like this. I don't know why I think she's so neat. This little one hanging on for death in the middle. What? You could just fly over, you know. I don't see. You could just fly over. But they do. They're cooperative. They're superorganisms, and they have the power. About 10% of bees, 10% of wasps, all ants, and all termites. And once you don't undo eusociality, you don't have any sort of behavioral instinct to break free. All instincts are to stay. So this is how we would define this extreme altruism. Use suicide squad to go out to defend a nest, the reproduction division. So we know we have a queen, sometimes two queens, overlapping generation. But the reproduction is that the helper bees, the worker bees, have surrendered their right to reproduce in order for the sake to enjoy the safety. And it's not particularly it is altruistic, but not particularly because they have the same, they're all sisters. All sisters. It's not like send me in my second cousin once removed and I'll look after her. They're all sisters and they're all working for the safety of the queen. They take care of the young and they defend the nest frequently unto death. And how do they do that? Well, then they need to communicate. They're not running on some kind of pre-programmed event. They have to communicate. Now, all insects communicate around mating. And they can do it a couple of ways. They can use sounds, vibrations. The cricket and the grasshopper do it through stridulation. Cicadas do it. I've heard different terms. They have these corrugated abdomens with a series of very fine muscles coming from their back, and they trigger it. So it just kind of it beats itself and puts up as we go. Really, there are cicadas in Africa that the sound is loud enough to deafen you if you stay around. So they get heard, they're ready to mate, they're ready to get heard. So that's true. And of course we know about bees and the waggle dance. I think most people here, a bee finds a good source, she comes back, she uses north as for the sun, and depending on the angle, the length, the number of waggles, and the number of times she repeats it, she's saying how far away the food is, how good a source it is, how much of it that there is. What else is she saying? Don't think she says. You and I can say that. But so she is conveying to the hive that there's a good source, and it is cost effective for us all to go. So those are some basics: mating, finding a mate, finding food. But if you're in a youth social community, you're going to have to do a whole lot more communicating than that. And you're going to do it. If you're an insect, you are an exoskeleton, and the risk is of being desiccated. So they're covered with these little chemicals, simple chemicals, lots of them. It's like an alphabet. So they can take these simple chemicals and create complex messages through these simple chemicals. So this is just off the top of my head. These are some of the signals that communicate. Like, go out and throw yourself on those whatever. Or is it time for us to swarm, and where would we go? All sorts of very complicated communications that are agreed on. There's very little that I could find, or even anything I could find, of dispute within the nest. Disputes are always with outsiders, and termites would be a good example of this. This was recently discussed, recently now might be a year ago, in dry uplands of Brazil, a termite mound. You can read it, the size of Great Britain. That is 1,000 miles from stem to stern. And they know it's a single colony. Now there might be many mounds. We know about termites and the way they construct their mounds and the air conditioning and all of this. They can take a termite from Land's End and take that termite 1,000 miles north to what we call John Groats, that's the tip of Scotland, and drop that termite in there, and it will be accepted because it's giving off the right chemical signal. The wrong chemical signal, it will be beheaded. The right chemical signal. And so there, the idea that this is a 4,000-year-old nest system just begins to suggest 4,000 years ago, what were we doing? Were we Bronze Age? I think I think we might have just come really the wrong way. And termites are the best example of the variety of body types, body shapes, and they have a secondary queen. So that is how, so what have we done? The miracles of evolution, a ton of them. They're the nexus of trophic transfer. They do all sorts of things that, they were the first to do all sorts of things that we take advantage of a lot of their products, and they're masters of getting along and playing well with others. So that is kind of the roundup of part one. So this is the introduction to part two. All things being equal, we'll have this next year. So what is the future? What is the present? What is the future? What is the present? And why should we care? The population is plummeting. Brooke and I each have a book called Silent Earth, sort of along the lines of Silent Spring. I can't remember the man's name. But he really has condensed the current science, all the studies and the observations and so forth. And so that's what we'll be looking at. Of course, the problem is humans. The background rate of extinction, the calculation is a little complicated and I can't remember it, but you can see the graph does exactly the same. The more there are of us, the more we're destroying habitat, the more climate change. Well, what is causing, we know the extinction crisis is here, but for insects, what does it look like? It looks grim. It looks very grim. This is pretty much up to date. It might be a year old, it could be as long as 2 years old, but I certainly would double check on this next time, but over every genus, every family there, you're getting terrific decline. Mosquitoes don't seem to be among them. So what's causing it? What's causing it? Well, this is a fairly new graph, and it's pesticides and fertilizers, and also in the other part there's monoculture. Because when you have monoculture, you don't have the variety of plants that you get in a meadow, and so these are treated with pesticides that can be ingested and basically destroy the ability of an insect to communicate. We know how important communication is. Climate change is giving a measly 5%. My opinion, and it's just this, I don't really have anything other than I think a good dose of common sense to suggest that that is going to crack wide open pretty soon. Because we all have various tolerances. I can be this cold, or I can be that hot. And if it's too hot, I can move a little ways over. And I can move a little higher. I can do a lot of things to try to adjust to climate change. Well, when I, as an insect, move, the plants I rely on are not going to move with me. Not in this lifetime. Plants, the range of plants changes very slowly. It changes, but it changes very slowly. Or you can go up a mountain, the monarch butterflies and mish will come, you go up the mountain, and the oyamel trees deal with the villages as the butterflies are in this range, and you can cut below this, and you can cut above this. And so now that the monarch butterflies in their wintry range want to move, they know where to go, because the oyamel trees have been clear cut. So that 5% is going to change when it gets hotter. Insects fail to reproduce. They don't sweat. They can't take off.
The fires alone.
Fires alone. So it's kind of grim, and I don't know how to not be grim. What are the other things on there? Ecological traits, urbanization. It all kind of amounts to the same thing. It just all amounts to people. Is what there are too many of us, and we're just a pretty greedy bunch. And on the other hand, I like to eat my dinner too. Yes, Bobby?
Speaking of, as the population increases and we hear more and more about insects as a food source for humans, have you read anything as far as that becoming more of a population problem for the insects, that people are, all these tons of people are going to try to eat?
I was gonna put that in the next one.
Oh, sorry.
Yeah, no, but that's a really important thing. It's like, all right, this is like salt in the wound, right? Because whether they're breeding programs, and that I don't think we're going to be chunking down. Although I did once, I had a trip to Thailand. I don't need to ever go back. And it was deep fried furry caterpillars in season. So that eating Aboriginal people, like in the first endorsement, they would eat larvae that, yeah, so that is going to happen too, but it's probably going to be ground up like fake birds.
Beyond meat.
They
Beyond meat.
Beyond meat, right? Yes, but to your point, in the current issue of National Geographic, there's an article on the species that could be now over-harvested and overexploited, and it's endangering the insect.
You do, you hear about it more and more about people using insects in the food.
The current issue of that National Geographic.
And
Okay, that's good to know. Well, and there you are. This is it comes in two versions. It's called something else too, but that's the English version. This is the U.S. edition, and this is the Swedish entomologist, and she's written a really good for the layperson book about insects, and so this is readily available. I've heard her speak. I heard she gave a TED talk, but she's probably been, I know she's been on Fresh Air with Terry Gross and stuff like that. So I know how long I went, but would you like me to put that back, Jen? Yeah, okay. Oh, okay. And then Silent Earth, Averting the Insect Apocalypse is David Goulson, Goulson. Everybody's finished with that? So now we have time for questions. Yes?
I was just going to make a comment. I spent some time in the food industry, and when you talk about insects, there's always been a quantifier for production of so much filth that's allowed in our food, and filth refers to any issue with our food. And that number is increasing. They are allowing more filth in our food now to account for the insects and the kinds of things that are allowed to be in there, because they know it's not altogether harmful. So if you look at Scientific American magazines, you'll see in the back of that book or the magazine, it's constantly reported as to who's doing well in those numbers and what industry or what company is adhering to those numbers. Makes it interesting on your peanuts. That's one of the things that you want to watch, how much, who's producing what peanut.
Why there's more peanut allergy, because it's really an insect allergy.
So, I'm just wondering what some of the solutions might be. Would you say that buying
Excuse me, I can't hear you.
would you say that buying organic food might be one of the solutions because they're not using pesticides?
I read your lips, but I thought you said something, you're buying organic food, we do organic, and if we have a remote chance of doing it. And years ago, the food industry, they didn't want to bother, and so they would put out ugly old food so nobody would buy it, and associated organic with almost gone bad. So now that at least has changed. That's what we do. I mean, we do that selfishly just we feel for our own, because we all bioaccumulate these toxins, and we all have a body burden of dioxide and all of this other stuff. So we do it mostly for ourselves, but I guess in the back of my mind, I'm doing it for the environment.
Well, just as a side thing, I love hummus.
Yes.
And I happened to watch a program on YouTube that was saying that, it's become such a popular American food, but they use glyphosate, unless it's organic hummus.
They use what on it?
Glyphosate, Roundup.
Oh, Roundup.
Yeah. So,
Yeah, it's Except that really it's, so what, did anybody notice that I madly love with Doug Calvin? We all are. Okay, let's face it, we all are. Doug Calvin is totally fabulous. And in his previous book, Nature's Best Hope, he talked that we are each of us able to do, we can't, like Mother Teresa, I can't do it all, but I can throw a stone in the pond and the ripples will go out. And Calvin is the same thing, we cannot do it all, but we can do in our own little space enough to create little corridors, particularly for the pollinators, because a lot of these don't fly very far, particularly the solitary bees don't fly very far at all. The honeybees, they're little power engines, they do. So we can, each of us have our own little mini organic. I'm doing a project where I have probably about half the size of this room, lawn, where it's taken an expensive sign in Spanish to mow only. You know, because we have the no-mow area, people are like that, well, this is a plant and wildflower foundation project to stop the pesticides, stop the herbicides, fertilizers, and fungicides, and mow only. And as the guy from artistry said, well, the grass will die. I said, that's the point. Let it die, and it's starting now to be replaced with, it's my little 6-inch meadow. And so there are things that we can, I live in a gated HOA. So there are things we can do that we can all do just little bits. We did try, did do some training, and I thank God they talked me out of it, that we were going to have bees where we live. And now I think I can be a beekeeper. But you can keep bees. I mean, there are lots of little things we can do bees here.
Do you remember the apiary that was not the whole wall?
No, that might have been before my time. Anyway, I probably taken up way too much time. Yes.
What's the difference between thorax and thorax and a carapace? What's the difference?
The difference between a carapace.
The spiders have a carapace, not just like a fly.
Hold on! We're not done. Go ahead. What was the question? The question is, what's the difference between a thorax and a carapace? The carapace, I think of with the pronotum on a beetle. They've got this hard thing about here that's at the top of the thorax, and then their top wings are hard, and they lift up to, they have 2 flight wings, and the carapace, jump in if I'm getting this wrong.
I think the carapace can refer to any hard part of the exoskeleton on the thorax or like the wings on the abdomen of a beetle. It's just the covering, not the segment of the body.
I think that we did say the same thing. So the pronotum is that part of the beetle that's right up behind the head, that is the tip of the thorax, and again, it's all part of the armor, and it's so. When we talk about, if I just hammer this home one more time, one little larvae, is that you can't jam that down and nest with the throat and steps everywhere. You know, you just got an armored car. You know, you want little sausages. Any other questions? What did I do? And I want to introduce Stephanie, who was my first editor, who said, go home and change that whole section.
I was nice about it.
You were.
And it was good. You know, you just need to
You take credit where it's due, and you did a great job, and I thank you for it.
And she's still talking.
No, that's what friends are for. When we're doing announcements, shall I do my announcements now?
Nope, I will call on you later. Thank you so much, Kate. That was just, it's wonderful. I don't know how you do everything you do. I am amazed. Thank you. I have a few announcements that I'm going to make. Meanwhile, there are, by head count, about 8 people in here who didn't sign in on the registry. So while I'm making the announcements, you can make your way up to sign in and get yourself registered. Now, general announcements, join us on our Facebook page. It is Mangrove Chapter of Florida Native Plant Society. It's long, but if you just type Mangrove Chapter into your Facebook search engine, you will find us. Join us on Facebook. There's all kinds of interesting posts on there, some of our walks, and just general posts about ecology and doing the right thing. Read our monthly newsletters. It's called the Mangrove Messenger, and when you're a member, you should be getting them every month. And if you're not, email me, emails on here, and let me know. Explore our website. Take advantage of all the information there. We have a calendar. We have a news blog, and actually get the best out of the news blog. You have to read down, a couple of pages, because the nature of a blog is that the newest stuff is at the top. So a blog that might be 2 weeks away might have been posted 4 weeks ago, so it's down the line. Upcoming events. Plant Native Day this Saturday. Lois, we want to talk about Plant Native Day.
Yeah. Plant Native Day typically highlights native plants and different aspects. We generally have a theme every year. This year, the theme is planting for pollinators, beneficial insects. So, Kate, we're on that page. It runs from 9 to 12 on Saturday. We're going to try and get chapter members here at least between 8 and 8:15. Setting up them. We got a lot of people signed up to help out, so we're doing all of that aspect. We will have Peace River Butterfly Society represented. They'll bring their tent and all their information and advice on raising butterflies, etc. They will bring plants. We have pretty much steered them in the direction of native plants. When we first started having at our events, they're mostly bringing the typical garden plants, but they segued into natives, especially because they're into raising butterflies. So they will be there. We, of course, will have our native plants, our homegrown members' native plants. I want to thank Ruth for helping me yesterday, digging in my yard. She works with magic on getting some plants dug and potted for me, so that's all behind. So we will have our homegrowns there, and we will also be having a little art in the garden type of sale. A lot of the stuff that I'm purchasing out of my house, because I'll be moving, will end up in the tag sale. So we're asking for donations for those items. So there'll be some art there, there's some garden items, garden theme or nature theme. And last but not very least, the native plant nursery from Sarasota will be here as well. So we will have a source of plants that are homegrown from 2 sources, and the native nursery plants that will be on sale. So that pretty much rounds up. I believe that Kate might be interested in leading a walk on Saturday.
Yes.
During the event, so.
We just have to decide what the best time is.
Yeah, I think we got to iron that quite out, but
No,
whatever
I'll
works.
be happy to lead the walk, and what we're gonna do is go down the Jeep Trail, and it's gonna be the reverse of my Amberjack walk, for anybody who's been on that, where we go mountaineering. What we're gonna do is go downhill, all of about 7 or 8 inches, and see what difference that makes in the habitat. So we're gonna be a theme, we're gonna have a good time.
Good, so anybody who comes Saturday, depending on when you're here, you'll want to sign up for the walk.
We'll put up a sign.
Yeah, we'll put a sign up and have people sign up. So So that's gonna be pretty much it. We're finally getting some sort of cooler weather by Saturday, like 80-ish in the afternoon, so we're hoping for the cooler weather in the morning.
What if it rains?
What if it rains? We don't have rain here, so.
We don't rain.
It is what it is. We want to
It's
We
like-
show up in rain. So we show up in rain.
Yes, yes.
Okay.
We're hoping that,
Yeah.
you know,
It's going to rain.
it shouldn't be like a total rain out, we're just predicting a shower, depending on when or where it is. And by Sunday, it's ICCA according to all this newspaper, which is my kind of weather. So that's about it, so, anybody who wants to buy plants or just roam around or walk with Kate, there's plenty to do on Saturday.
Thanks, Laura. I want to emphasize, the member-grown plants are really reasonable. Our prices start at $1 for member-grown plants. So, you know, if you're on a tight budget, come and plant your yard full of $1 plants. Next upcoming event is Venice Rookery Day, which is a week from Saturday, March 19th. And multi-talented Kate is in charge of the Venice portion of that, and Ridsburg is, and Jerry are going to be there representing our chapter. So, Kate, you want to talk about the whole thing?
I just want to tell you, if you see a man named Bob Clark coming towards you, turn around and run away. I don't remember being asked to join the steering committee. If I was asked, I definitely didn't say yes. And somehow we're the steering committee.
Right, and I created the brochure that I'm still waiting to get printed. I sent it a week ago, but that's another story.
Go get it. So, Laura and I have been friends for many years, and this is a great opportunity for us to work together, which is not what I'm spending down here to tell you. So, you can't pick and choose in nature. You can't love birds and hate insects. You can't love birds and not want to plant native. It all works together, and so that is the theme. We went through this, it took us this at first, and I think we've got it, we nailed it, but basically you have to really support everything.
It's plants for the birds is the theme at Rookery Day. And is everybody familiar with the Rookery at Venice Audubon? Pretty much, I see heads nodding.
Yeah, so it's 9 to 12, it was gonna be, because we didn't want to deal with food trucks or too many toilets.
And we should even get Ruth up here because she is doing the first demonstration of the day on plant propagation. Ruth showed that Florida maple tree. She did a propagation class here, which was what, 2 hours?
Yeah, I think we can do our.
Yeah, so on Rookery Day, it's only 45 minutes, so it's going to be an abbreviated one. But it's about how to propagate native plants.
So we've got Peace River, one of the Peace River Butterfly Society will have presents, a partial presence. They're going to be manning our butterfly garden that was paid for by a donation from Mangrove Chapter. We're going to have Leave the Leaves. So that stop breaking up those leaves. We're going to have the Audubon bird thicket. We've got the bat houses and we've got the rookery. And Jesse Wilder and I are each going to lead a tour of the rookery to kind of thread the needle of everything and also introduce ideas that aren't necessarily.
And Sarasota County Parks is there and
Healthy Ponds
Collaborative start.
Yes,
For a red
and then we have some master gardeners are coming. So it's really good, and we have, of course, what I've worked on was the Nature Quest test for kids so that they could go around and find all this.
And Linda Soderquist is having a lot of children's activities as well, tattoos and games, like beats, what bird belongs to the beak kind of thing.
Linda Soderquist, she swears the spoonbill together.
Yeah.
So it's going to be fun. What we're trying to tell you is it's more fun than New York. It's going to be a lot of fun, and we're going to be there. And I think that it's going to be a good event to help educate people of the integrated nature of an ecosystem, and that includes your own backyard.
9 to 12, Saturday the 19th.
I am so glad to see Venice Audubon starting this, because there used to be a lot of nature festivals around, and just anytime you could choose from several nature festivals to go to. Well, COVID kind of crashed and burned all those, and Venice is starting the tradition again, and I'm really glad to see that, because I've missed the nature festivals. Okay, a couple more events. There will be an Earth Day celebration Saturday, April 23rd, here at Cedar Point. We'll tell you more about that next month. There will also be an Arbor Day celebration at the Northport City Center Green on April 30th, and we'll tell you more about that next month as well. Now, for the raffle, one more thing.
This is my last announcement. This is actually not my announcement, this is Eileen Gurley's announcement, but she had to go prepare for the Rookery Day event, so she couldn't stay. For those of you who've been around a long time, you know that the Florida state bird is the northern mockingbird. It's a lovely bird, don't get me wrong, but it's also the state bird of Mississippi, Arkansas, Texas, and Tennessee. We have the most exquisite bird imaginable, the Florida scrubjay, endemic to Florida, headed to extinction. We have to really promote the preservation of this bird. And one way we can do it is make it the state bird. So I'm going to leave this up here. If you go to change.org/Florida scrubjay to sign a petition to make it the state bird, I will be thankful. The shamrock birds will be thankful. Brooke and I, our word of advice here is don't get emotionally involved with scrubjays. It ends in tears. But that is it. So I will leave this here for somebody to take a picture of the site, and you will get it, please. That's definitely it. I'm done.
Okay, for our raffle this month, we have books. They're just assorted books on assorted gardening and other ecological topics. They're on the back table. And please stay seated while we're having the raffle. We will pull out numbers. If your number is pulled out, you get to go back and take a look. Now, on the right side of the tables back there are old issues of Palmetto. Palmetto is the monthly magazine that is put out by Florida Native Plants Society at the state level. Those are vintage issues that we found in a cabinet when we were cleaning out cabinets. Some of them go back to the, I know, 90s, maybe some before that. But, for the most part, native plants don't change. So any information that you find in there is going to still be relevant. And I absolutely refuse to throw any of those away. So please take home, whatever you want. They're free. We just want them to go to people who care about them.
Does anyone need a sticker? Did everyone get one?
And there's things to look at over here.
Yes. Brooke has displays over here. Wander around and look at displays for Cedar Point, for heaven's sakes. There are wonderful things. We got a bobcat that's actually, I don't know, a partridge or a quail or something over there. So, a quail. Good, so look around. Now, at the end of the raffle is social time. Then you can spend your time talking to all your friends, making new friends, getting acquainted, and all of that good stuff. But meanwhile, okay, we're going to draw out two at a time. So you can go back in time. We have 4197 and 4207. Come on, somebody's got to have these. Last four numbers.
Oh, I have.
4207, good. 4197, good. Both of you, go back and get a book. Yeah. You want to put the raffle? I'll put the raffle things. Joan has another donation book Okay, we'll just do the last three numbers. We have 189 and 186. Good. Who else? There has to be two. Good. $188 and $198. Good. Both Cheryl and Ray got something. That's pretty cool.
I have 198, but those were my books that I donated.
Okay, we'll draw another one. Lois doesn't want to take them home again.
No.
Okay, 199. We're getting quite proud back at that table. The selections are so good, people can't decide. Wow. Okay, 192 and 203. Okay, 200 and 209. How many are left?
3 left.
3 left.
2 left.
Okay. 206. 193. What a beautiful home. Wow. And it should be last one, 204. Okay, well, thank you all for coming. If there's anything left to ask, you know what your number is on. Late announcement, my bad, sorry.
I just wanted to say that I was having trouble parking today because in the spot I wanted to park was a road performance and it was not moving up very fast. So just wanted to put you guys on alert, please look under and in front of your cars. Thank you. Welcome to the